They say when gods speak, the earth doesn't whisper, it shatters. In the dense forests of southeastern Nigeria, where mist clings to the trees like secrets and silence has its own weight, there was once a time when the skies did more than just weep. They punished. To the people of this ancient land, thunder wasn't just weather, it was a warning. A low growl meant displeasure, a flash of lightning, divine judgment, and at the center of it all was Amadioha, not just a god, but an elemental force of reckoning. He needed no sword, no army, no mouthpiece, just a single bolt of lightning to turn kings to ashes and nations to rubble. He was justice. He was rage. He was the sky when it bleeds. But one day, a man dared to test him. A king, power-drunk and swollen with pride, decided the gods were beneath him, that their silence was permission, that he could rewrite the laws of the land without consequence. But what he didn't know was that Amadioha never forgets. And when the sky finally split open, it wasn't just thunder that came. It was vengeance. Tonight, you'll hear a tale rarely spoken aloud, a story passed down in low voices and wary glances, a truth too dangerous to ignore and too haunting to forget. Because what unfolded next wasn't just punishment, it was a cosmic reckoning, one that turned an entire kingdom into a living grave. So lean in, listen closely. Because what happens when a mortal challenges the gods isn't myth, it's memory. A memory scorched into the land by fire and lightning, still echoing in the bones of the forest. This is folk tales cinema, where forgotten legends rise again. And tonight, we bring you the wrath of Amadioha and the king who thought himself untouchable. If you're drawn to untold African legends, chilling mythologies, and the twisted consequences of pride, don't just watch, be part of this journey. Hit that like button, subscribe to join the tribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale that haunts the soul. Now tell me in the comments, do you believe a mortal can ever escape the wrath of the gods? Let's talk in the comment section. I'll be there reading every word. In the ancient kingdom of Obinzi, nestled between two rivers and surrounded by forests that whispered old truths, there ruled a man named Eze Anyaka. His people once worshipped him for his wisdom, but wisdom has a way of slipping into madness when power goes unchecked. He was born under a blood moon, an omen, the village priest said. The boy would either bring glory or doom, but his mother, blinded by joy, laughed it off, and the child grew, and so did his shadow. By the time he was crowned, Anyaka no longer feared gods. He no longer bowed at shrines. He saw thunder as noise, not language. He mocked rituals. He spat in the sacred river meant to cleanse rulers before coronation. I am the god now, he said before walking out, leaving priests shaking in disbelief. But the gods, they listened, and they waited. For years, nothing happened. No thunder, no floods, no signs. The skies stayed still, as though testing him, as though watching how far his arrogance would reach. And he reached far. He tore down sacred groves, burned the oracle's hut, declared that sacrifices were barbaric and that the gods were no longer needed. He built statues of himself where Amadioha's symbol once stood. That was his final mistake. One night, the sky changed. It wasn't rain. It wasn't wind. It was something older, something colder, something alive. At first, the people heard it, the deep hum in the clouds, like a beast waking from slumber. Then the lightning came. Not one strike, not two, 7 bolts in the span of a minute, each one slamming into the palace walls, splitting stone like dry bark. Screams echoed, flames rose, the air itself seemed to peel. They say the last lightning bolt didn't just strike, it entered the king's chest, that it seared through him, leaving no mark on his skin, but turning his eyes white like river pearls, that he was still standing when it happened, arms wide as if daring the sky to do its worst. It did. When dawn came, the palace was gone, just ash, broken idols, and silence. No body was found, only his crown, split in two, left on the ground beside a charred feather. Some say Amadioha took him whole. Others believe the king wanders still, cursed to walk storms, never resting, a warning to anyone who forgets their place. And from that day forward, no one dared speak his name above a whisper. Let's return now to the heart of our story. But before we sink into the fall of a king drowned in his own pride, we must first understand the power he chose to defy. Because to truly grasp the magnitude of his mistake, you must first meet the God he dared to mock. His name is spoken with both reverence and dread, Amadioha. To call him a god of thunder would be to strip him of his deeper terror. He is no chaotic storm, no blind bringer of destruction. Amadioha is something far more ancient, more precise. He is judgment incarnate. In the old world of the Igbo people, he was the invisible thread that held moral law together. A force that didn't just punish wrongdoing, he restored balance. He was the hand that tipped the cosmic scale back into place when human arrogance tried to tilt it. You didn't pray to Amadioha for wealth or favor. You called on him when justice had been denied, when blood had been spilled wrongly, when truth had been buried and the guilty walked free. And when that call was made, the answer came not with words, but with lightning. They say he does not speak in whispers. He speaks in cracks of sky. His voice is thunder. His language bolts of light that tear open the heavens. And when Amadioha speaks, the land listens. His image was often depicted as radiant, masculine, crowned in light, sometimes cloaked in the form of a white ram, sacred and untouchable. That ram was not just symbolic, it was a warning. White because his wrath is pure. A ram because when he charges, he doesn't stop until the walls of pride are shattered. The elders taught that a lightning strike is no accident. It's not nature, it's a verdict. It means that Amadioha has reached his decision and has carried it out instantly. No trial, no second chance. Just fire from the sky and silence afterward. But for all his fury, Amadioha was not a tyrant. He was worshipped, deeply, honestly, even lovingly. In many towns, his open sky temples still remain, places with no roof because no walls can contain the god of thunder. People brought him offerings, white goats, cola nuts, yams, and songs that echoed into the sky. His priests weren't mere spiritual intermediaries. They were judges in their own right. They didn't ask for blessings, they pronounced warnings. And when the thunder god's will was spoken, it was final. So now I ask you, what kind of man wakes up one morning and decides that such a god is beneath him? What kind of mortal soul, breathing borrowed air, crowned by tradition, believes himself so mighty that even the gods should kneel before him? His name was Judifor. In those days, many generations ago, there existed a prosperous kingdom called Ndoria. Cradled by rivers and rich with trade, Ndoria was a jewel among the southeastern lands. The soil yielded abundance, the markets sang with music and color, and the shrines were filled with grateful prayers. At the heart of this kingdom stood its monarch, King Judifor, whose very name meant holder of justice. But as often happens with those who hold too much power for too long, justice became something he wielded, not something he upheld. He was brilliant, yes. He was beloved once. But as the seasons passed, love curdled into fear. He became a man obsessed with legacy, not through righteousness, but through domination. Judifor's armies grew. He conquered nearby clans, imposed taxes on sacred lands, and stripped ancestral shrines of their offerings, declaring the gods owed him thanks, not the other way around. The priest grew quiet. The elders warned in hushed tones, but the king grew louder, drunk on the echo of his own name. He built statues of himself beside the river of ancestors. He declared the age of deities over. What can gods give, he asked, that I cannot give myself? Then one evening, a man dared to speak truth. An old priest, bent with age but unbending in spirit, came barefoot to the king's court. His staff was carved with thunder marks, symbols known only to the high seers of Amadioha. The court was in full celebration. Music played, dancers moved, wine flowed like the river during the rainy season. But the priest did not flinch. He walked straight to the throne and raised his voice, not in anger, but in warning. "My king," he said, his voice dry but steady, You have spilled blood unjustly. The gods do not sleep. Amadioha has seen. He does not forget. He awaits your atonement." For a moment the court froze. Even the dancers stopped mid-step. A few nobles lowered their eyes. The musicians pretended to tune their instruments. The air itself seemed to shift. And then Judah IV laughed, a long, guttural laugh rising like smoke from deep within him. He stood, lifted his golden cup to the sky, and with fire in his voice declared, "Then let your thunder god wait forever. I am king, not him. And if Amadioha dares, let him come down himself." The priest said nothing more. He bowed once and left without a word, but the silence he left behind was deafening. Because in Igbo land, words are not cheap. Words are power, especially when spoken aloud before witnesses. And that night, the gods answered. The skies, once clear and full of stars, began to churn. Clouds rolled in from the east, thick, black, and humming with rage. No wind blew, yet the trees trembled. No rain fell, yet the rooftops dripped cold. Then came the thunder. Not once, not twice, but wave after wave, as if the heavens themselves had begun to gallop. Some swore they saw a shape in the clouds, a ram's head, horns curling through the mist, staring down at the palace from above. Others saw lightning dancing along the palace gates, leaping like spirits too wild to be tamed. Inside, Judah IV sat in his great hall, oblivious. He sipped palm wine and smiled. A storm? He had survived worse. But this was no ordinary storm. This was Amadioha's breath. By midnight, every torch in the palace went out, and then came the bolt. It struck not the king's body, but his throne. A massive pillar of light split the carved symbol of the kingdom in two. The floor cracked. The air smelled of burning copper. The wine in the king's cup boiled. He stood up, confused, as a second bolt slammed into the shrine of ancestors in the courtyard. Then a third hit the gate. By the time the seventh bolt came, the entire sky had turned white. Servants screamed, soldiers ran, flames licked the sky. And through it all, Judah IV stood defiant, drenched in sweat, eyes wide, lips moving in disbelief until the final bolt came. And everything went silent. By dawn, the palace was a shell, blackened stone, charred wood, smoke coiling into the sky like prayers gone unanswered. Of the king, there was no trace, no body, no bones, nothing. Only the broken crown, lying where the throne had been, and a single white ram's horn, unburnt, untouched, resting beside it. The people knew what had happened. So did the earth. So did the sky. Judah IV had dared the gods, and the gods had answered. This tale has lived for centuries, whispered by firelight, told by griots, sung by mothers, to children too young to know fear. But now you've heard it too. And this is only the beginning. Because some say that Amadioha did not destroy Judea IV entirely, that something of the king survived, twisted, changed, condemned to roam storms, his soul bound to thunder. Others say the gods left behind more than fire. They left behind a curse, one that would pass from bloodline to bloodline, punishing arrogance wherever it dares to rise again. The night the gods returned, the air changed first. It wasn't the kind of change people could explain, not with words anyway. You didn't need to be a priest or a seer to feel it. It was there in your chest, in the space between heartbeats, like the moment before scream, a stillness so deep it scraped at the edge of the soul. Not a single insect moved. No owl cried. The wind itself had stopped. The kingdom of Andoria, once alive with the sounds of drums and market voices and laughter spilling into alleyways, now sat under a suffocating silence. It wasn't natural. It wasn't peace. It was the silence of a world holding its breath, waiting. At the heart of this silence sat a man who believed he could never fall. King Judea IV, the once celebrated ruler whose pride had outgrown even his kingdom, remained seated on his towering throne within the royal compound. Around him gathered his wives, his warriors, his counselors, all cloaked in silk and fear. but nothing could match the brightness of the king's arrogance. His voice cut through the air like a whip of fire. Let the clouds twist. Let the heavens shake. Let the sky roar like a wounded animal. To him, it was all meaningless noise. Let the sky grumble if it must, he bellowed, eyes wild with wine and pride. I am the lion of the earth. No god commands me. Outside, the clouds churned. They didn't move like natural clouds. They curled inwards, darker than the night, like they were folding in on themselves, preparing to release something ancient. The winds didn't blow. They watched. The sky above Andoria wasn't just brooding. It was alive, and yet the king laughed. He toasted to his throne, to his own name, to a future he believed he could shape without the gods. But deep in the old part of the kingdom, beyond the city walls, in a cracked clay hut near the riverbank, an old woman stirred. Her back was bent from years of kneeling before altars. Her hair, once thick with black coils, had gone gray like the ashes of burnt offerings. Her name was lost to most, but in her youth she had been a priestess of the rain, a speaker of signs, a reader of clouds. That night she looked at the sky, and her blood ran cold. She did not tremble. She did not pray. She simply whispered, voice barely more than breath. Onuadilla, death has arrived. Because in the world of the Igbo, when Amadioha chooses to move, he does not creep. He doesn't knock. He doesn't beg for your attention. He announces himself with thunder that splits bone and lightning that speaks. And the signs are always clear, bold, divine, impossible to miss. The first omen is the ram, not a beast of flesh and wool, no, not something you can touch or trap or bleed. This ram is light itself, forged from the storm, glowing with the fire of the skies, a creature woven into the fabric of spirit. That night, as the storm boiled above the treetops, a young boy from the edge of Andoria was walking home. He had taken his goats into the field before sunset and now hurried them back in the growing dark. But just as he reached the bend near the forest edge, he stopped. There it stood, a colossal white ram, glowing so brightly it lit the grass like a second moon. Its horns spiraled toward the clouds. Its hooves left no print. Its eyes, burning red like molten copper, stared not at the boy, but at the sky. And then, in the blink of an eye, it vanished. The boy ran home without his goats. He would not speak for 3 days. The second sign came shortly after. The heat. It wasn't the dry heat of a harmattan or the clinging sweat of a rainy season afternoon. This heat was thick, almost suffocating. The kind of heat that presses into your lungs, that makes it feel like breathing, is a sin. Village fires began to flicker. Lamps refused to hold their flames. Some went out entirely, refusing to stay lit, as if even fire itself had grown afraid. Animals grew restless. Goats bleated into the night. Dogs whined without reason. Birds flew in spirals, unable to find direction. Even the chickens, always grounded, always noisy, went completely silent. Then came the lightning, but not the kind you've seen. This was no wild, random strike, no crackle and flash that disappears in a blink. These were symbols, etched across the clouds in fire. Words, images, messages, burned into the sky in the sacred, swirling strokes of the Nsibidi language, a language known only to priests, to oracles, and to the spirits that move between the worlds. The people looked up and understood. Judgment was coming. It wasn't a matter of if, it was already decided. Back at the palace, cracks had begun to form beneath Judeafor's throne. Thin at first, hairline fractures that crawled like snakes across the marble tiles, pulsing faintly with an orange glow. As if the earth itself was warning him, whispering from its deepest veins, "Run!" But Judeafor did not run. He did not listen. Instead, he summoned the royal drummers. "Let them play," he said. "Let their music drown out the trembling of cowards." And so they played. A fast, desperate rhythm. Drums struck with calloused hands, as if trying to push fear back down the throats of the court. But with the very first beat, the thunder responded. A roar from the sky, louder than anything the court had ever heard. It crashed over the palace like a tidal wave of rage. The drums split, the skins tore clean off. The wooden frames shattered into dust. The drummers fled, barefoot, dropping their sticks. Even the guards lowered their weapons. But Judah IV still stood, still intoxicated by pride, still believing he was untouchable. He stepped out onto his palace balcony, arms stretched wide, his royal robes snapping in the electric wind. And he screamed, "If Amadioha is real, let him strike me down. I fear no ghost. I rule by my own hand." And the world listened. Time paused. The trees stilled. A wind rose from nowhere, strong and fast, sweeping through the palace and extinguishing every torch. The entire compound was plunged into blackness. The sky above was no longer a sky. It had become something else entirely. A mouth opening wider, tearing. And then it came. One single bolt. It didn't crack or flash. It screamed. It didn't hit the ground. It didn't miss. It struck exactly where it was meant to, the heart of the palace, the center of the king's pride, the throne. The sacred seat, carved from yoka wood, passed down for generations, inlaid with gold and wrapped in the fabrics of past glories, turned to ash. There was no explosion, no flame, just light. And when it vanished, Judah IV was gone. No bones, no crown, no echo. Only the shape of him, outlined in scorched earth. The sky wept. Rain fell, not in a downpour, but in thick, heavy drops, as if the heavens themselves were cleansing the land, washing away what had been tainted. The people of Andoria, watching from behind windows, from doorways, from the shadows of their huts, began to weep too, not just in sorrow, but in fear. What they had witnessed wasn't death. It was divine erasure. The next morning, as the clouds began to clear, a hush still clung to the city. The once bustling markets remained empty. Children clung to their mothers' legs. Elders sat silently in the dirt, heads bowed. Then, just as the sun began to rise, a white ram appeared. The same ram seen in the omen. Silent, unafraid. Walking slowly through the ruins of the palace, its eyes still glowing, its hooves leaving no tracks. No one dared touch it. No one dared speak. The people parted for it as it passed. They knew. The gods had chosen. This was no longer a kingdom ruled by man. From that day forward, the people of Andoria turned back to the shrines. They fasted. They tore down the golden statues Judah IV had erected of himself. They rebuilt the altars he had burned. The priests of Amadioha were welcomed again, not as advisors but as guardians. Children were taught to fear the sky, not for its thunder, but for what the thunder meant. And every time lightning danced across the heavens, they bowed their heads, whispering, "Chinekibiko, Amadioha, spare us," because now they understood. Some kings rise on thrones of gold. Others are crowned in fire. And when the gods decide to speak, you don't argue, you listen. So why, after generations of dust and rain, after kingdoms have risen and fallen, why does the tale of Amadioha's fury still echo in the hearts of the people? Why, even today, do the elders of Enrioba lower their voices when they speak of the king who mocked the gods? It's not just a story. It's not just memory. It's a warning. A fire-carved lesson passed from breath to breath, flame to flame, whisper to whisper. Because this tale, this thunder-scorched myth, is not only about the fall of a king, it is about the delicate balance between man and the divine. It is about what happens when pride reaches too far into the heavens, and the heavens strike back. When you live in the land of the Igbo and many other African cultures, you grow up knowing that the gods are not distant. They are not silent. They walk with you. They eat with you. They sleep beneath your roof. They are the wind that carries your words, the river that hears your secrets, the fire that knows your guilt. And Amadioha? He is the God who listens and acts. He is not a God of chaos, no. He does not strike at random. He does not seek attention. He waits, he watches. And when the scales of justice tip too far, when blood stains the soil without reason, when a sacred vow is shattered, he does not send a messenger. He comes himself. He speaks not in riddles, but in thunder. He judges not with hesitation, but with lightning. To those who walk in truth, Amadioha is a protector, a shield, a bringer of daylight. But to those who walk in arrogance and cruelty, he is a storm that never forgets. And in the kingdom of Ndoria, where King Judeafor once reigned, the skies would never again be taken for granted. Let us return to that land, scorched and shaken in the wake of the king's fall. The night after the lightning struck, the wind carried a strange stillness across the hills. The palace was gone, reduced to ruin and cinders. The gates, once proud and golden, stood open, warped and blackened. The statues of the king lay shattered, his image broken at the feet of his own people. The nobles fled, the soldiers whispered, the people gathered in silence, afraid to speak, afraid even to breathe too loudly, as if the air might still be listening. And then, as dawn broke, soft and gray across the horizon, they saw it, a white ram. No one saw where it came from. It simply appeared. It walked slowly, calmly, its hooves touching the ashes without leaving a print. Its eyes were pale as moonlight, its horns curled in perfect spirals, untouched by soot or smoke. And it wandered through the ruins of the king's palace, past the cracked throne, past the split stone, past the broken crown. Some fell to their knees in awe. Others turned away, unable to meet its gaze. For they knew this was not an ordinary creature. This was a sign that Amadioha had spoken, and that his judgment had been carried out. But more than that, it was a signal of balance restored. You see, the white ram isn't just a sacred animal. It is the physical embodiment of Amadioha's mercy, his purity, his justice, his willingness to cleanse what has been stained. It is said in the old text that when the thunder god brings destruction, he also leaves behind a path to healing. He tears down corruption, yes, but he also calls forth renewal. And the appearance of the white ram meant just that. The storm was over. The land had been washed clean. But the people of Ndoria were still haunted. Though their tyrant king was gone, the damage he'd caused ran deep. Crops had withered under his greed. Clans had been torn apart. Sacred groves had been defiled. Fear had replaced faith. And now the people were left in a kingdom of smoke and silence. It was in this silence that the women rose first. Led by an old herbalist named Inenna, whose husband had been executed by the king for questioning his taxes, they began the rites of cleansing. They swept the palace grounds, not with brooms, but with branches from the sacred Udala tree, believed to carry the breath of the gods. They burned incense. They sang songs not of mourning, but of balance. They planted yams in the blackened soil to reclaim the land from ashes. The priests, those who had hidden during the king's reign, emerged once more. They gathered beneath the open sky, where Amadioha's temples had no roof. They rebuilt the altar with stones from the river and wood from trees struck by lightning, and there they made the first offering, kola nuts, yams, and a bowl of rainwater. And the white ram? It did not flee. It lay beneath a Udala tree and closed its eyes. Some say it remained there for 7 days. Others say it vanished the moment the last hymn was sung. But one thing is certain. From that moment on, peace began to return. It came slowly, like water creeping back into a dry well. But it came. Trade resumed. The rivers flowed clean. Children laughed again. And the people remembered, not with fear, but with respect. Because the story of Judeafor's fall was no longer just about a king and a god. It was about all of them, about every person who had turned away from truth, who had allowed power to go unchecked. who had stayed silent when silence became complicity. And it was a story they would carry forward. Elders carved the tale into wooden panels. Griot turned it into song. Mothers told it to daughters while weaving mats. Fathers recited it by the fireside. And each time they ended with the same phrase. Remember, the skies may seem calm, but thunder remembers everything. This myth, this living memory, would go on to shape generations. It redefined leadership. Chiefs began taking oaths not just before men, but before the open sky. Before assuming the throne, rulers were taken to Amadioha's shrine, where they placed one hand on the ground and one hand to the sky, promising to serve with humility, or fall like Judah for. Even in times of peace, the people left offerings beneath the idolatries. Not out of fear, but out of respect, an acknowledgement that they were never alone, that something greater than them watched over the land. And that's what makes this myth endure. Not the lightning, not the fear, but the truth. The truth that power must serve justice, not defy it. That humility is not weakness, but wisdom. That nature remembers, the gods remember, and the people, they must never forget. Because even now, in a world of skyscrapers and cell phones, where thunder is explained with science and kings wear suits instead of crowns, the lesson remains the same. When leaders forget the people they serve, when justice is twisted, when arrogance replaces reverence, the balance will break, and something will come to fix it. Whether you believe in gods or not, that truth still applies. In our world today, the same laws of balance echo in politics, in families, in communities. Power without conscience always ends the same way, in silence, in ruin, in thunder. That is the gift and the curse of the Judea for myth. It forces us to ask, what kind of power do we serve? Is it one that uplifts or one that burns? And when the thunder finally comes, will we recognize it? This has been another chapter from Folktales Cinema, where the past speaks to the present and ancient truths rise again with fire and voice. If this story moved you, made you reflect, or gave you a glimpse into the power of myth, please tap that like button to keep the stories alive. Subscribe for more African legends that go beyond the surface. And drop a comment. What did this tale teach you about humility, power, or the role of divine justice in our world today? I read every message. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you know another African myth or legend you want to see brought to life, name it. Folktales Cinema will tell it. Because in the end, it's not just about stories, it's about remembering. Until next time, keep your ears open. The skies may be quiet, but the storm always listens.